Hello, I'd like to welcome you to a very special session, Zaha in Miami. My name is Neil Leach. I'm the director of the new 2-year non-residential Doctor of Design program at Florida International University in Miami. And this is the second in a series of Miami Urban Studies, the lecture in the Miami Urban Studies course, Miami, Do You Love Me? Today, we're going to be looking at Zaha Hadid and her special affection for Miami. Many of you will know that Zaha recently, the office, Zaha Hadid Architects recently opened, the design for their tower, 1000 Museum, was recently opened in Miami. And many will know, of course, that Zaha tragically died when she was in Miami. But many will not know that actually Zaha spent a lot of her time in Miami. She owned a suite on Miami Beach, and she would spend much of her winter in Miami. Today, we're bringing together, I think, three very special people who knew Zaha very well to talk about her special affection the special affection that Zaha had for Miami. We're delighted to have Patrick Schumacher here today. Patrick, as you will know, is the principal of Zaha Hadid Architects. He is an extraordinary person in many ways, someone with boundless energy. In addition to running the office, he also teaches all over the world, is a colleague of mine in Shanghai, and is the author of a number of books. Prodigiously energetic, I would say, in many ways. And he has been guiding the practice since the death of Zaha. We're delighted to be able to welcome Patrick today. Also, I'm delighted to have Claudia Bush here. Claudia Bush is a colleague of mine at Florida International University. She worked with Zaha for many years, and more recently has been collaborating on a series of projects. She will also be reminiscing on her recollections of Zaha in Miami. And finally, also John Stewart, another colleague from Florida International University, who has been running MBUS, Miami Beach Urban Studies, that Zaha visited, and who also has connections with the office. So the way we're going to proceed today is that Patrick's going to kick off and talk about some of the projects that Zaha was involved in Miami. Then we're going to hand over to Claudia Bush, who's going to talk about her recollections of Zaha and the projects on which she collaborated. And finally, John Stewart's going to come in and we can have a discussion about this topic. So I'd like to invite Patrick, first of all, to share his screen and say something about Zaha in Miami. Thank you, Patrick.
Absolutely, it's a nice event. Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to be here. So I will show the 1000 Museum Tower, which is for us an absolute milestone project. And I'll show you a few other skeleton projects. This is one of two skeleton projects we realized, having designed 50 or so, to reach the construction of two, and the Miami one is in particular beautiful and wonderful piece for us, a big step forward. Well, we later can talk more, with Claudia about the Zaha's affection for Miami. I mean, she had so many friends here, not only Claudia, but many others who lived here, and she came every winter, every December for Miami Art Basel, and stayed initially mostly in the Delano Hotel, and then later on upgraded to more luxurious places. And in the end, she had a wonderful flat and expanded it, and in the end, self-designed at the, oh God, I forgot.
W Hotel, no?
The W Hotel, of course. And it was nice, really nice time with all the friends and many dinners. And she loves the sun and the beach and the pool and relaxation. And of course, Miami is a fantastic spot for not only friends of Miami being there at that time, but friends from London, from New York, from many other places. So as a social place, it's really unique, and this is also where you can catch up with friends, because this is where there's a certain schedule. Where particular also New Year, many New Year's parties were celebrated in Miami, and they're very fond memories. And the atmosphere, Miami, is very, very friendly and easygoing, and that's what she liked. The people are very, very friendly. We had several different projects. Claudia will show some others, and other failed attempts to get projects here. I didn't show all of those, but so I will talk about the tower, which was wonderful to have this opportunity. We met also the clients, Louis Birdman and Greg Coven, and through friends, through connections. They had actually commissioned the Chats Tower, right next door, which is a beautiful tower, and so that's the way we got into it. Let me share my screen. Chad Oppenheim, he's a great architect, and he was also friends of Zaha, and slightly upset that we got that tower. He was hoping to get it, to do that one. All right, so I have, 1 second. Is that coming through? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So this is my slide I often use to introduce tectonism, and so Miami Tower as a structural expression belongs into that latest phase of parametricism. And it's a more mature and intricate style and methodology and paradigm. So, and we had worked towards this on a number of projects where we try to express the structure, in particular, have used the structure and the differentiation of the structure, which should and would be, if it was properly optimized, different at the lower part of the tower, mid tower, upper part of the tower. So these members become less network, more denser and thicker at the bottom, and less networked and more filigree at the top. So we've done that a number of times. We used sometimes topology optimization. We did a lot of that as well with students first. So I don't have that showing, but DRL and also the Vienna studio, we explored these opportunities. And the idea here is also that the differentiation of the skeleton then becomes a guide for programmatic differentiation. And also there's been a number of examples, so it's from New York, for Kuala Lumpur. You can see here the very strong differentiation in stages and segments, or kind of gradient. This is the other one, the second only skeleton tower we've managed to execute. Sorry, I have more images later. This were one of us study for Rabat, another study for another Middle Eastern tower, because also the depth of the skeleton relief, and then a secondary facade kind of structure can also do shading work. This we got relatively far with. This was for Bilbao, but in the end it also didn't work. So you can see how the interesting topic of layering facade and structure. This was more or less simultaneously with the Miami design. Some towers in Brisbane, Australia, also didn't come through. So I mean, these larger projects, there's so many factors which can get in the way, whether it's a finance, something happening with a client, or neighbors putting injunctions. That happened here, by the way. Yeah, this is the tower in Macau, where we also managed to finally get something built. Now, so this is the Miami design. I think it's beautiful. The rhythm of differentiation, the way the skeleton moves through different phases, as it were, as it moves up and becomes quite fully and open, with the column splitting up at the corner, quite heavy, and encompassing the podium at the lower part. And then initially, this was also designed in a way that we were initially briefed with 3 apartments at the bottom part, 2 apartments in the middle part, and 1 apartment per floor. That is in the top part, and this was also then aligning with the changing of the structural articulation. In the end, these were also in the end divided only into 2 per floor, and that was initially the idea. You can see here that in the lower part there's also 2 double height, like kind of townhouse apartments. Otherwise, they're very large single floor flats. And you can see here already we had worked on all the interiors as well. So fantastic lobby spaces, pool deck and amenity in the between the podium, which is car park, by the way, and then top of tower special amenities for the top 10 floors up here. So this is the way it was rendered out. This is a Chet Oppenheim Tower. Same clients, is one of the best towers, I think, in Miami as well. So these clients definitely have taste. And this is the way I used to show the project when before we started to build. I mean, rendering out the beautiful tower and then showing top of tower, showing these balconies and the vistas you would get. Later on, I have some photos. We actually built, couldn't find a photo now. We built a mock-up of this whole balcony part, which had to do with a special construction method of having precast elements pulled together around the rebar and then filled with concrete. So it's a kind of solid bond of prefab and in situ. Only at the bottom part we had to shift to in situ, then cladding afterwards. But otherwise, this is the I don't have many floor plans in this, but this is the floor plan of the pool deck, and it's interesting. It's quite beautiful. You get pool and you get a fitness area and so on, and then we get this fantastic loggia where you also see the structure, where you're between the structure and the facade. I have photos later of that. That's the condition here. It's obvious. So this is the plan for the top of tower with the pool areas and the split columns, etc. And very fantastic social spaces. That's where we had the opening party. Unfortunately, couldn't find images of that yet. Last year we did the opening party in the winter. So this is a design with some double height area, a special big table, massive table, and then pool up here. And beautiful staircase swinging up across these 2 levels. This is a rendering. So this is a construction that went rather well. It was a certain risk involved to use that first time in the world construction to ship these panels from Sharjah and bring them together around the prepared rebar, lock them together. Initially, it was meant to be just tied together. In the end, they had also steel kind of braces to pull them together and then pour the concrete and do that floor by floor. This was only possible because the concrete manufacturer was also connected to one of the investors, actually. So which meant there was a synergy, and the risk was just taken. It went well. Here you can see that at the bottom this was in situ. Here you can see we started up here. Up here we started with this special system, and below it later on with the cladding was put up. Because these curves were too strong, and also timing meant that we just had to get the thing out of the ground and couldn't wait for this kind of special technique to come through. And this just was a thrill to see when we came and before it was finished, see these things going up and see the beautifully sculpted surfaces. And this voluptual sense. And this is around the car park. I mean, these are fantastic multi-story boomerangs to screen the car park, and of course lets a lot of air and ventilation into the car park. And some of these panels were inhuman to place. I mean, we were cursed by our project manager on site. I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, they're super precise, but I mean, Chris Lepine specified 1 centimeter tolerance, and that was obviously absolutely inhuman. So, but then this is the beautiful kind of fiber concrete pieces. This was more resin-based fiber concrete, lightweight concrete, and this is the side view as we go around and look up. The side view is relatively flat because we don't have balconies here, only at the edge. So all the 3 sides are different. The front has, you know, the very, very large balconies, the 2 and then 1, and then the back side has more articulation of sub balconies. So it's interesting. They all sides look different, and this is the entrance, which is quite strong with that kind of kickback, leading you into the building. So that's when it started to finish, the way it appears, the way the light plays on it, with that beautiful continuous cantilevering balcony, uninterrupted for the whole width of the tower. And then here we have this 2 glass kind of scoops meeting to separate the two apartments from the museum park, looking up obliquely. So this is the backside, which is a little bit different. You can see here that that there's more subdivisions with respect to. I mean, just it's still 1 apartment, but you know, these are huge apartments, so there might be different parties, or you have more for your guests. You have more privacy for some of these balconies. And just a few more minutes, and it's very nice details. So difficult in America, in particular, to do this in situ concrete would be quality control-wise very difficult, as well as timing probably. And but the feeling is very solid. So you can see how the apartments separate out. You have privacy, strong privacy in each balcony. Some details. So this is the entrance, and some nice lobby designs, integrated furniture, of course, like we do, working with the architecture. This is fiber reinforced plaster. And then the pool deck, it's quite beautiful with these, let's say, arcade layered spaces all around the tower at that point, and with a lot of interesting, you know, niches and in between spaces, covered spaces, and nice vistas. These were some of these most difficult pieces up here, where we get cursed about the tolerance demands. This is the view from the pool deck out. So inside you get all the fitness zones, and then you have this nice in between. You should look back at the structure and that space between the inner envelope and the exterior structure. The next level up, there's amenity space at saunas and things like that, and beauty, whatever. I mean, and so we've designed that bar, and then it leads to another level up actually with that staircase, and some, I don't know even what, solar, whatever, lounge seats. This is a kind of timber scoop. And then looking up, so we're going up. This is some of the snapshots I made of the apartment, the balcony condition at night, viewing out to, I think, towards South Beach during the day. And this is the big front balcony. This is Chris, the main project architect, done a fantastic job. This is really a very large balcony here. You can see more of those fantastic spaces. They're quite deep and long, and it's great for parties. I mean, I've seen parties on balconies, the whole party on the balcony. This is the kind of thing you do in Miami if you can. And this is the apartment inside. It's quite tall. You can see here's the corner balcony, then the split column, and then comes the big balcony. It's fantastic patch. The very top of tower, so there's a double height area, and then there's a kind of single height area with the pool, and this beautiful kind of water reflection like pattern, flower pattern, and it's very clean. There's nothing but a beautiful relief which reflects the light beautifully. The night view. So these are also fiber reinforced plaster panels, and there's a very nice kind of relief. Reminds us of the paper reliefs we used to do at the office. And a nice kind of free swinging steel staircase mediating between these two levels. So you can see also towards the double height. Of course, in Miami at that height, the wind forces are pretty extreme. So that's why the glass margins are quite strong. And yeah, some nice views up across the two levels. I enjoyed that. There's a helipad on top, and it's one of the few things is, you know, this is attracting a special crop of customers. So that's about a tower. We had these kind of Russian origin clients who wanted to do another one close by. So we started to sketch this, but it didn't come to anything. But I wanted to end up with this because this is something which I thought was a very nice idea and a nice design. This is Miami Beach. There's a kind of large site. And the idea here is this to a private university by a Brazilian university entrepreneur to launch that in Miami. I think it's a great idea with all the Latin Americans, you know, converging on Miami anyway, and to get a lot of Latin American students maybe come there. So it's quite dense with the gardens and with these kind of shading areas and balconies and bridges. These would be the classrooms on different levels. So that's something we developed, and the Miami Beach mayor loved it. But in the end, it didn't come together. I don't know what it was. It was, I think, the investors got in some kind of conflict. I don't know if it would have been approved. I think I forgot about that. There's also a political process of voting in Miami Beach, which would have happened. I mean, it's something which I think killed our car park project. But Claudia will tell us more about that. Yeah, it's a nice. We did a lot of effort. The client in the end ran away without paying us, so I don't know if that's not a shame. Just on the side, but it's a beautiful design, so we'd like to show it here. Well, Claudia might have more, but this is so in the end, in the last few years, Zaha, she always rented in W Hotel, and she started to purchase. She then fused two adjacent apartments into that, bringing her own furniture, tables, sofas, and design. And art she purchased at Art Basel. So it's a very nice place. So that's for me. I hand back.
Patrick, that was great. That was great. Super interesting projects. Maybe we can head over to Claudia. Claudia, as I mentioned, used to work with Zaha, for Zaha, and then has been collaborating on a number of projects. So, Claudia, welcome.
Okay, yes, Patrick, that's great. I love the building. The building is just stunning, 1000 Museum. I mean, we live here, and I think the success of it is it works at every scale. Like when I drive down the highway, I see it as part of the skyline. I go down, like you have this view when you go down on Biscayne Boulevard, and we're looking up, and it's just this weaving structure that goes up. And then when you are inside, actually to experience the structure, it's something completely different. You know, like I love there's one apartment, you saw it, the corner, you get on it and you look out and you have this amazing view. It looks like you are on a ship actually. And then the last floor, you know, it's really beautiful. It's where the pool is and the reflection of the light on this pattern. And it's a really stunning building. I mean, we're so lucky to have this building here and that it got completed in Miami. So yes, I worked for Zaha actually a really long time ago, 30 years. And that was after I studied in Germany. And then I went to the States and studied at Columbia University. And so for a personal reason, and also because maybe I didn't want to go back to Germany, I wanted to go to a city where there are opportunities. And so in the early 90s, when I came to Miami, I thought there were opportunities. It took just a little longer than I thought. So then Zaha, so let me share again. Let me share. Came 20 years ago, the first time to Miami. And so, and she came 20 years ago, the first time, and she, like Patrick was mentioning, she would come here for vacation. And so, you know, we saw each other every year for vacation. We became really good friends. And so we spent also time with my daughter. So you see, this is actually Zaha on the left with my youngest daughter. And the one on the right is, so that was 16 years ago. And then the one on the right is my daughter, you know, a couple of years older. And we're walking down Lincoln Road. And she goes, "Look, Mommy, there is Zaha on the book." And she pulls it out and she shows it to me. So, you know, it is something about Zaha. Zaha was a very warm and kind person, but had this capacity of, you know, how, she, you know, socializing with all of us, but she also was this celebrity. So, yes, as Patrick mentioned, she really loved Miami. She loved the warm weather to come here, but she also liked that the city had many other things to offer. And so she developed a lot of friendships, and you know, she also became part of this community. At the end, you know, she bought this place, and so So she is with us. She came to our office. I have also an office, and she came to our office and she gave several lectures. The one on the top right is her at the Young Arts, all with FIU students. The one on and all the FIU students were really like excited seeing her here. And like I said, there's Miami is a great place to be outdoor. So this is us in the group, having lunch at the Mandolin, and then the great friends and connections she made. And I think one of the things, so the top right is the director and conductor of the Miami Symphony Orchestra, Eduardo Majoret, and then a really good friend, Irani Sakan, a photographer. So what really changed, I think, Miami is not just the architecture, it's also the people that came and actually stayed. So, a lot of times in the 90s, people would come here, transients, you would come for visit, vacation, but leave. But what happened in 2000 and since the last 10, 12 years, people actually from all over the world stay. And I think that they ask for a different architecture. As I said, so going back when she was here 20 years ago, she loved the hotels along Miami Beach. And if you come for a visit, certainly go down that strip. These are the amazing hotels from the 40s. So the first one was where she stayed is the Delano Hotel that was remodeled by Philip Stark. And in 2000, it was the Hip Hotel, and it was really fun and cool to hang out at the pool. Then later she bought a place at the W, so that is actually, a couple of hotels down to the north. And you see they all have like this amazing, beautiful view out to the ocean and the beach in front. So as Patrick mentioned, I was here on site, working with a great team of Zaha Hadid architects, in London. They did all the design, and I was here basically, checking that, everything is smooth and well. And so what, after several design studies, there was basically this one idea to transform the apartment. It was a very simple idea, actually, to use this dividing walls with two apartments, and that dividing wall between the two apartments to replace it with this continuous ribbon. And as this is a very simple idea, but it's actually much more complex to build it, because when you see it, you can't put one continuous ribbon of metal transported into the apartment. So it was actually built in 4 pieces and then melded so that one would see no seam. And the floor as well, you see there's like a resin, and it created this complete smooth surface. And I think, for architects, it's really important, the seam, as it's an element of the design. So there were a lot of photographs done, a lot of very detailed oriented, that is done perfectly well. We probably sent them like 100 pictures. So these are some images of the installation, and you still see the blue line where they will weld it further. So these were done actually by manufacturers from the ship industry, and it was done really beautiful. And then, like Patrick showed already, she added her own furniture. And I think it's really nice because it emphasizes the space, these glass tables, keeping it open and bright, and it's completely different to what it was before, and one really can enjoy the beautiful view out to the ocean. So that is a project. So we were also involved and collaborated as local architects for Collins Park garage, and that it was a public project by the city. And so it was in 2012. And at that time, it was the thing in Miami to do parking garages. So, if you look, there's, also this amazing garage done by Herzog de Meuron. So they had basically a competition out for doing this parking garage. And they invited Zaha to compete for this, and they presented this design of a parking garage, which is like one continuous loop. And I remember that was in 2012, and we were all, there was this conference room, we were all sitting there, and you guys, Patrick and Zaha, were presenting, and they were presenting this continuous loop, very simple, and they looked at it and they loved it. And I said, okay, that's the project. And then they asked, okay, can this be built? So for Miami, that was still a risky thing to build a continuous loop of concrete. And, then Patrick and Zaha showed all these projects that you had done in China and in the Middle East. And it was an amazing thing actually to be in this room and to see, and see also the building officials in Miami, that they could see that something from a drawing can actually be built. So, everybody was very excited, was commissioned the project and also further developed. So it was actually also interesting. It was this continuous loop. It was next to the museum and the library. So the idea was that the loop would spread over to the other side, over the street, and then be higher on one of the sides and create a park. So then that was then called Collins Park. Now, the project went on for 3 years. Patrick, you said how to explain why it didn't more go further. Well, I think it was a political shift, in many levels. And the people that were in the beginning there was nobody there 3 years later. And then unfortunately it got canceled. So it would have been a great project. So, well, and that is her. She was a great force and catalyst to Miami, and I miss her dearly in Miami. Thanks.
Thanks, Claudia. Beautiful. I just maybe John Stewart, another colleague of FIU. Maybe you'd like to kind of reflect. I know that Zaha came to MBUS a couple of times. On maybe reflect on your impressions of Zaha.
Well, no, I'm kind of I'm almost choked up with Patrick and Claudia's kind of reviews. It just reminded me of how what an important kind of force she was. I think Claudia used that word. And I was actually thinking back to the spiral that Claudia ended on. It reminded me of the Hague housing projects where Zaha, one of the first projects that I worked on when I was in the office was a continuous house that had on every level a different aspect of the house, the kitchen, the dining, the bedroom, beautiful drawings. But I'm sure that there were some earlier kind of, interest. This wasn't the first time that she was thought about the spiral and had been sketching it. She would sit in the office and sketch these spirals and they would kind of be coming together. But I think that project that Claudia showed, the parking garage, really maybe was the culmination of that, of a lot of that research and that line of thinking. The only other thing I wanted to share, which was kind of personal, I would go over to Zaha's spaces, and at one point you didn't mention, but in the middle of that row of hotels was the Setai, and I remember she used to stay in the Setai, and she'd always stay in an apartment that was high up, and I live in condos too, and so I was asking her why she likes to live in these, and why she likes to live so high off the ground, like in these condos when she's in Miami. And she was mentioning that she's told me that she really loved this. She'd always been fascinated by this idea of flight and flying. And I don't know whether Patrick or Claudia, you ever heard that from her, but I then started to think about that. And if you go back to her very earliest, the Peak project, the Peak competition, and you look at the renderings as she was going through the Peak, it was really kind of, she was flying through that project, and she was always kind of in the air, looking at things and flying around it. And I just kind of see that a lot of that coming together in the work that she showed, and even in the kind of the amazing vistas that you showed, Patrick, of the new tower. That was just like, you're part of the sky, you're part of this larger world, and the larger world is conforming to your kind of space. And the last observation that I had, I don't know if this is true or not. Patrick may be able to shed some light on this, but when I was in the office, one of the most shocking things that I remember Zaha doing was taking a model that I had been doing. I think it was a wall in Berlin. It was, hundreds of thousands of feet long, and I had been thinking, but I made a small model of it, and she just kind of took the model and she wrapped it around her wrist and said, "Oh, this would make a great bracelet." And it was just, what was so shocking was her instant ability to switch scales and to think at multiple scales simultaneously. And while you were showing my apartment looks out onto her tower, so I see it every morning. But I was wondering whether, at the time, she was doing some very beautiful jewelry that had also a kind of skeletal component to it. And I was wondering whether this idea that she could possibly be designing jewelry and a huge skyscraper at the same time, and hold them both in her head and kind of get them both produced, was part of this. Maybe you have something to say about that. That's all.
Well,
I was just
actually, she does have the spiral rings and spiral chandeliers.
Yeah.
And there's also the Tatlin spiral, which we instantiated in the Guggenheim.
Yes, I worked. That's the project.
Try to pull it off, and she loved the Guggenheim itself as a concept. And
but the skeletal, did she do some skeletal rings maybe for some
I think, yes, we did skeletal jewelry, yes. We did definitely this kind of big bracelet, which looks, it's more of a kind of porous, layered, like bony structures, a bit like the Macau skeleton as jewelry. So yeah, she always was interested, obviously, doing design across all scales, all the way from urbanism into furniture, interior products, as well as jewelry and fashion as well. Yeah, this was because the way that she sketched, and so this was the method was formed to program, and formal systems and intricate, strange forms, and then exploring their utilization. And there could be, these sketches were oftentimes indeterminate with respect to their scale, but because they were indeterminate with respect to the project they might be attached to or might be used for. So sometimes you're sketching for within the context of doing a competition, but also if there wasn't something right now, she just sketch anyway, and that could become anything. But also, of course, when this whole idea of the drawing, these building up drawings, even on a particular project, with lines which are yet indeterminate whether these lines will end up just surface divisions on the floor, or would be walls, or would be roof overhangs, that would also be left to be explored. So there were kind of graphic spaces and graphic structures that would then slowly be interpreted into more determinate and concrete elements. So she wouldn't start with thinking about, this is a wall, this is a roof. It was more formal structures which evolved, and then it'd be interpreted by cutting the cardboard and peeling up, peeling down, or whatever. So that is a very strong, and I think it's important, this methodology. I mean, particularly in teaching as well. In teaching, it's easier to do that because you don't have to have a determinate result for a client with very specific demands. So that's where we do always the formed program methodology. In an office, yes, we have to deliver, but I mean, Zaha was not, was more proliferating formal structures, which could then be used in various ways, and wasn't always precisely working on a particular project. As I said, but even if you do in a project, then there's various ways of interpreting particular sketches. So and that means also the indeterminate is the scale with respect to function, and it's clear that this is the way she always worked. I mean, even as a student.
Yeah. Do you remember, Patrick? I seem to recall being there when the office was just starting to use computers. Maybe Dan had just gotten like a first Apple. Is that correct, or were they there when you were there, Claudia? Or were they in the 80s? I don't remember.
No, we
had nothing. We had no computers at all. I mean, I got a little bit. I mean, I didn't have a computer, but when I was at school in '87, I was using a computer. But in the office we had nothing, and then yes, in the end there was this little Mac purchased, and then I was working on it. So there was a whole period where we had parallel, where we did sketches and drawings and computer sketches, which were then printed and worked over, but we didn't do any drawings. I mean, plans. It was only three-dimensional explorations, which were done on the computer for the first few years, and then the final. When we had better computers, I think it was '95 when I started to work, do full drawings, full entries on the computer. Up to then, it was a mixture, but in the '80s we had zero computer.
Zero, yeah.
But I remember that when we were in the office, that drawing was a major element to really develop the drawings. And like you were talking about this flying over, I think, one of the great things what she was doing, I remember with Ritra, to look from far, to really not see just the site, to see the whole context and the city. And I think, and then creating these drawings and in the connectivity with the projects. And I think that the projects became then extremely successful, become like elements of the site.
I think, yeah, it always strikes me as being so prescient to think about the environment as well as and everything around it, as well as the building. I mean, we seem to be going there more and more as we're thinking about our environment more in a more resilient way, and just to kind of not to let your building be just an object in an otherwise untouched landscape, but to think about the way it impacts everything around it. And those are all systems that come together.
John, can I just make a point there? What I was really struck by was this idea of Zaha and flying. And, it's actually, I get this impression of Zaha almost like a butterfly, coming into land somewhere. And, when I was a student, I've got to say, I studied at the University of Cambridge in the 80s. And I was so disappointed by what was happening. I'd seen the Sydney Opera House. I'd been really kind of that's why I did architecture in some ways. That and the combination of King's College Chapel. I thought that it was going to be inspiring. Instead, we were stuck in this kind of crisis of postmodernism. Which seemed to be a kind of absolutely going backwards. The complete opposite of what I was looking for. And then Zaha comes along. And in the most extraordinary way. Just lit things up in an incredible way, and then I think that was extraordinary in many ways. But she in a way, she is in some senses like a butterfly, in a sense decontextualized in an interesting way. Because what I found interesting about the AA and also about her office was that it was in London. And yet it was somehow not British. It was completely kind of deterritorialized in an interesting way, and deterritorialized in terms of the ideas as well. She wasn't stuck in this kind of world that everyone else was stuck in. And it seems amazing that, I think the fact that she's doing it in Miami, and I think Miami Beach is very similar in the sense that it's a kind of place that is a very exotic space where, Gianni Versace came to live and so on. And actually obviously fitted her perfectly. But there must be some extraordinary tensions that come out of being this, exotic butterfly, as it were, landing somewhere. I recall the project she did, she won the competition for an opera house in Cardiff, and this is before she started building very much, and it was such an amazing breath of fresh air, but then it got dismissed by the locals as some kind, I think it was called a deconstructed pigsty. And you find yourself in this kind of tension of this most extraordinary individual who's coming in and in a context of often a very kind of parochialized local bureaucracy. And I'm sure that as an office where you are operating absolutely, completely internationally, and then being stuck with kind of local bylaws and conditions, that must have been the biggest tension in the office itself. So, I mean, it's very contextual in some ways, but also completely decontextualized. And that's the magic in a way of much of her work.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the loosening of the geometry, the idea of an explosion, for instance, where the fragments are flying in all directions. That's part of that flying thing. I mean, she used the phrase "the space of flying," and this was also coming out of suprematism, and suprematism was they were at the time already thinking about space flight, and some of these compositions are unearthed. And in this kind of idea of hovering and the idea of a Sputnik, and so she was into all of that, but in particular the spaces we generated in Cardiff, for instance, there's a space between the opera piece and the other wrapping around piece. There's a kind of oblique surface, and then series of cantilevering boxes. They're ponderated and shifted. And if you between those, you're suspended with variations and things below you, above you, and all around you. And that's the space of flying. And that's sometimes we call she wants this kind of helicopter view, or when you're hovering in mid-air between buildings. Let's say you can do that in the Miami project I showed just now, where you have different things, bridges here, overhangs here. And this kind of layered, also the way the floors, the cutaway, so we loved also Portman, both of us, with the atrium, particularly the Marriott in New York, where you have these different spaces. And the atrium is also is opening up here, and so there's also a space of flying. And we got very big, of course, in the atrium pursuit, and that's the space of flying. So I picked up the phrase "the space of flying." She used it, and then something she finds in Leonidov, and there's some of these perspectives where you have the towers and the aircraft overhead. That's the world where this comes from, where she got inspired. Of course, it is very much in the peak as well. That's why the fascination with cantilevers as well, because when you're out on a cantilever, particularly there's another one above, there's this kind of total freedom of where the view goes, and that's the fascination with that, rather than having things framed and boxed in. It's this continuous flow of space. But that, which you find also in Mies and the Barcelona pavilion, so on, but that then more three-dimensionalized. And Mies in the end got also, it's far too kind of obsessed with the crystalline modularity and so on, and lost that sense. But in initial, the suprematist / the style, ponderated composition, three-dimensionalized and dynamized, is this kind of the paradigm of architecture.
We have our DDES students here in the audience, so I'd like to also invite them to ask some questions. Marina, I know that you have one.
Yeah, hello. Thank you all. Thank you, Patrick. It was an amazing presentation. I have a lot of admiration for your work and Zaha's work as well. And I want to make you a question. It's more a kind of a theoretical question, but I want to ask you, in your book, The Autopoiesis of Architecture, you, in a way, let outside Gothic architecture in the definition of architecture. I mean, you say that in a way it doesn't have a theory because it doesn't have an author. And however, this idea of a structural expression that you use in the tower takes or refers a lot. I mean, it takes a lot from Gothic architecture. So in a way, my question is, what is your, or if you know, Zaha relationship with this architecture in terms of collaborative authorship?
Okay, so well, yeah, I mean, if I was talking about the, I mean, what I'm trying to put forward is to get an understanding of our discipline as discourse-based and innovative, and where the drawing becomes this medium of speculation, which is a kind of historical takeoff, and you know, where this clear, and it also ties in with where people say you have to distinguish architecture from kind of some very ordinary, let's say, vernacular, routine tradition about building kind of structures, because architecture is invention, is imagination, etc., which you don't have in traditional forms. And so the Romanesque medieval is clearly this kind of vernacular it is, and then the Gothic is transition, but you don't have authors, you don't have design fully. And in the Renaissance, you have a complete design of buildings and a complete and the discourse and the radical consciousness of innovation and so on. That doesn't mean that there isn't fantastic results in the Gothic, which were more kind of intuitively, iteratively over hundreds of years, kind of found through trial and error and empirically kind of evolved. So there's not a kind of value judgment. It just was meant to be kind of a reflection on the distinctiveness of architecture, which as an innovative theory-led discipline, which is also very much based on drawing and simulating, transferring the kind of trial and error process onto drawing. And it includes perspective. So you also can already visualize and explore the phenomenology and experiential quality of what you're doing. And also you have to convince, of course, many others. If you do something radically new, you have to make it tangible and compelling. That's what you need drawings for. So that's what I meant. But in terms of the structure, actually it's interesting. So of course the initial world of Zaha had no much interest in expressing any structure. It was a world of flying plates and planes. She didn't mind a certain heaviness sometimes, or hovering. There wasn't an articulation in structure. But when we developed, in a way, the way this came into the discourse through for us, Frauto, and you know, so as a when you know, parametrism. I mean, her very fluid, ever more curvilinear version of deconstructivism and the space of flying, when it became computation empowered. And then we had to at one point get into structuring this as well and so on. And there was a fascination with Frauto to have some very open and freeform, irregular, these open architecture exploiting kind of structuration. So she was into Frauto, she was into Candela and these, and then we developed this in the university research with also with skeletons, and so she got into it eventually. But it obviously wasn't initially her thing. It's something which evolved. I don't know when this started, in the 2000s somewhere.
Patrick, can I ask one thing? I mean, the Russian, the suprematists and the Russian constructivists, I think, were absolutely crucial. Obviously, in many ways, as a student, I was fortunate to have Catherine Cook, who took us out of that world of postmodernism. It's fantastic to have those insights. And I guess that the crucial figure in some ways, in terms of Zaha's background at the AA, must have been Rem Koolhaas, who was obsessed with these things, and also actually taught Zaha, I think. Do you want to say something about what Rem?
Well, it was actually, of course, Rem and Ilya. So they were both her tutors, and I mean, originally Rem was Ilya's student, and but then I think there was a very close tension of it, which was Rem put on her work, and I think she learned an enormous amount. And the Russian stuff came through Rem. and Rem was in Moscow early. She then also made trips to Moscow later. So yeah, definitely that was a Rem and Ilya influence.
Can I invite the rest of the DDES students to chip in and make some comments?
I have also one question. First of all, I would like to thank you, Patrick, and Zaha Hadid office for everything what you done for the industry and for coming out with this magic and incredible ingredients for the formula of the successful building. And every building which I visited in person made me feel always special. If it was residential, I felt like not in even a 5-star, but 10-star spaces. If it was commercial, it was always turning me ambitious. And I remember I was getting home and it was like productive working. And it was really like unique in creating this like special building environment. When I met Zaha first time, I was very lucky in person in 2013. And of course, as Russian, we spoke about Russian suprematism and Russian schools of Hutamas. And, you know, it was similar to Bauhaus, German Bauhaus. We had it in Soviet back in 1920. And a year ago, I would like to speak a little bit about education. A year ago, you posted the 13 theses on the crisis of architectural academy. And I'm curious what you also think about disappearance of traditional craftsmanship from the academy. For example, the drafting skills. Currently, a lot of students, they have lack of drafting or sketching or understanding. For example, I would not imagine that modern student will understand this abstract Zaha Hadid drawings or sketches. Then with implementation of computational design, I feel like a lot of students start to lack have common sense of understanding the building structures, the basic building structures. So they can come out with a fancy, beautiful, fantastic models, but they don't understand the basic concept, how to build the things. And also, I think another traditional craft, which is lacking right now, is model making. And for us as an architect, it's very important for understanding the spaces is to make the model. And this is like entire philosophy in meditation. When you make a model, you have additional time to think, to adjust and to make it. And also in terms of the current condition, when everything is remote, we don't have any more traditional office culture and traditional design studio culture. So what do you think is the perspective of the education when we literally almost globally 1 year working remotely, and how it's, what is the impact on professional development of the young professionals and students? So it was one question. And second question, do you think architecture should be more intuitive or rational?
Well, I start with the last one. I mean, I believe in intuitions. Usually they mean something, they're evolved, they're built up, the way we kind of condition through experiences. And but I also believe in then the attempt to rationally reflect and critically reflect and therefore own those intuitions and understand why certain decisions are intuitively made and whether one can kind of rationally reconstruct them. So that's what I actually love. I've done that in some of my writings with respect to the fantastic, let's say, intuitive innovations, radical innovations Zaha delivered to the language of architecture. And there seems strange and surreal, but what's the advantage, for instance, of a free-form curvature in terms of adapting to contingent site conditions, of finding trajectories through complex spaces. So this kind of a crazy idea of making a freehand pulsating line and form, and not just rationalizing it down to arcs, but literally trying to say that needs to be built. This is one of many intuitive leaps which one eventually needs to rationalize and understand why this was advantageous, good idea. Otherwise, it is easily dismissed, and also it's just maybe. So I think this is often in the division of labor. I mean, it's similarly with, you know, what's this fascination with gradients, with bleeding one zone into another and so on. And then it needs to make sense of what's good about how, spaces which might be not dissected upon crisp boundary lines, but where maybe the programmatic mix is gradually kind of migrating and changing, and that means that there's flexibility of usage across that phase transition, for instance. So I've done a lot of that, where I trust also my own intuitions, and that is also when you have a kind of developing an eye for something is balanced or not, and as a first kind of guess of a structural soundness, and then you can so but we can also sometimes we have to sometimes also correct our intuitions, certain aesthetic sensibilities, if they are nostalgic or locked into, prevent us from opening up the, let's say, the morphologies to new potentials of the contemporary, if we have the wrong kind of aesthetic investments or the wrong intuitions. So I think intuitions, we can never get away from it, because we can't sit down and calculate and rationally justify every single thing. So we need to rely on them, but then at critical moments, let's query them, and then once we've kind of confirmed the rationality, that means the life-enhancing advantageousness of certain certain ways of working, for instance, and certain predilections and decisions, then you can kind of go back to them and feel comfortable in following these intuitions again. But so I think there needs to be this dialectic between intuition and rational critique. And in the end, if you don't have rational critique and argument, you just have clash of intuitions. So then, but the rational discourse can resolve those clashes. The other thing is, with respect to drafting, I think I can recommend to students I think that everybody is still kind of sketching in one way or another on the side, whether it's over printout or loosely. But elaborate drafted artifacts, I don't think there will be much time for that. I mean, the students student life is short, and there's only so much you can pack into this. So I think that maybe it's becoming kind of master drafter and as the teenage years are better for that. I mean, that's when I learned just to draw. and so I don't think we can afford that time in the university curriculum.
Patrick, just one thing. I mean, I completely get the intuition thing, but the other thing is that I always get the sense with the work coming out of your office that even though it's drawing upon this kind of intuition, this and this sense of free form, that it's very precise. In other words, a curve cannot be anything but another, but what it is. It reminds me almost of Alberti. What is beauty? It's something from which you can't take anything away or add anything but for the worse. And so it's almost as though to my mind, it's almost like the work of your office is almost classic in that point of view. Is that fair? Or
well, yes, because it's true. But I mean, it's still something which has underlying rationality. I mean, if it is, and it ties into drawing. If you want to draw a person in a dynamic position, you want to get some kind of dynamism. You want to get a balance, a poise, and you can see whether that's right or wrong, and that's quite subtle. So you see it when that's why you need to find those lines. It's more of the eye than the hand. It's a kind of selective process, and the same as when you compose in Maya and so on. I mean, it's easier because when you have splines and nerves, they already have a mathematical kind of a structure which is pleasing. rather than, but you also get this when you run the hand fast. So this the secret of Zaha's incredible beautiful drawings and that kind of assuredness is the rapidity, because if you have rapid hand movement, you have actually the physics of the, you know, the centrifugal, you know, whatever, that you get the physics into the drawing. If you do this, then you have to do thousands of lines. Zaha was able to put one brush stroke down, and, you know, because it's like writing. It's beautiful handwriting, calligraphy, and that's the way she's put. But that means also you can't. It needs to be. It can't be scaled. It can't be fitting into something particular. But it has its internal logic, and you get that through the force of the actual pulling the hand across, and then also the pressure. The brush pressure and as the ink fades off. These are all laws of physics, and it's similar in the computer when you use Maya tools like this. They're kind of inbuilt laws of physics, and we are sensitive to the ordering, the lawful differentiation you find in nature through physical processes, and that's why. That's where we get the sense of it's vulnerable to, you know, you can get it wrong if you want to kind of invent those lines by patching them up out of dots and not using Maya, then you have to you need to rely on your eye, but you can't find it in the first stroke. So and we have very kind of learned eyes. You can see what's what's a formation which is coming out of a force field, or what's the kind of garbage heap or junk crashed up, munched up piece of disorder, because that's where we had a 50 or 100 non-correlated events kind of killing kind of a structure. Right, because there's no connection. I mean, if you have a nice water washing down the beach, you get the beautiful ripples. If then a truck rolls over, or is 5 other events, randomly disconnected event, kill that beauty. And then we look at it, then you know. So yes, there is this kind of precision. It's a sensitivity to this, that these curves have that kind of tension and right kind of flow. Of course, there are many versions of that you could get right, but there are many more versions where it could be wrong.
Can I just follow up into one question? One thing about Zaha is she studied architecture after she studied maths, and I'm always intrigued by those with a background in mathematics. I mean, Alan Turing has got a background in mathematics. Chris Williams also, we saw him in Digital Futures last Saturday. I mean, he has this sense that the elegance and the simplicity of a sine wave or something, you know, if you can be very precise. Do you think Zaha's background in mathematics had any impact on the way she used to think?
I don't know, to be frank. So I wasn't, ever since I met her, she wasn't into mathematics. She was into geometry, of course, but not mathematically. I mean, I studied mathematics, but this was at the time it's more so kind of a logic, calculus, and proving theorems kind of a world, and not so much the world of geometry.
I felt Zaha was incredible shock. You know, so things were complex. She would just synthesize it sometimes into one idea. It's very focused. You know, I think when you one of these, what's the name of the project in Wolfsburg that you guys did, the Science Museum, Faena? Yeah. So, you know, I went there when it was nearly done, and it's an amazing building. It's actually extremely simple. It's a floating huge box, and it's holded up by these structures that are like cones, you know? And so the idea is extremely simple, but the geometry and the flow and the movement is very complex, like the way how you go in, and that's how you experience the space. And I think often like Zaha would sketch, I think it was sort of intuitive, but also extremely rational. I mean, she would exactly in one movement understand what would be the idea or the concept. So I think Zaha had that capacity. So maybe studying math has a certain logic that translated, later into creating these kind of, systems and understanding of the project. And it was always also very much about space making, I think.
I have a question. Hi, Patrick. To Miami, I cannot really say too much. I just remember one anecdote when Zaha was coming to a review to Angewandte, and she walked in with magenta flip-flops, which had even heels. So that was really, she was bringing this joy and playfulness also to Vienna. So that was great. So my question actually is more like related to the discussion on the digital futures, actually from last year, and like where do you see, and also what we're discussing here in the DDES, where do you see AI and machine learning, like a little bit of your outlook and how you're using it at the office? Because we've seen like Deep Himmel Blau and Tom Main like using it on an aesthetical level, like harvesting their archives in drawing and looking for new aesthetics. Or you see it more in a resilience term that you can life cycles of buildings and learn about the buildings, or you see it more in optimization as kind of a next grasshopper, or just like you're at the very now, what is where you see?
Well, at the moment, it's more in the teaching arenas, AA, etc., where we get into it. I mean, optimization, of course, is very important. We do it. I mean, this kind of particular image-based GAN proliferation and style blending, etc. We are not at the moment doing that. I'm interested though. I think it's an interesting technique to proliferate potentials. Overall, I think in all aspects, more on the exploratory side, but also in the kind of optimizing and rationalizing side of things, AI could become more and more important. So to sort out very complex program arrangements and optimizing for adjacency matrices, adjacency matrices which you build up. It could be path optimization. I mean, we also do these kind of agent-based live process modeling where we're using kind of gaming AI utility functions for agents, and we're now also starting to use it for let's say what I call creative spontaneous environments where various elements of the architectural systems, partitions or doors or furnishings have some kind of reinforcement learning of their behaviors, the way they respond or actively seek out their own utility maximization or their own best utilization through the human agents. So that these are interesting, I think, ways forward on both on the functionality of things, which obviously has an impact on morphologies and form indirectly. So then you just take up whatever forms this will take, as well as on the direct form proliferation. So I'm very positive. I mean, we can't do everything. We have 2 research departments already doing having various multiple research, let's say, agendas, still working on geometry optimization, on fabrication, gamification, and participatory urbanism, live process modeling, and now we're working on VR and this idea of cyber urban incubator, meaning we're working on simulating virtual environments for communication. So we have already a full a full kind of schedule. So in which machine learning plays a part in some of them, not the kind of AI which, for instance, Neil is interested in, and some of which happened, I see now in Miami with Bolian. So we're not into that, but I'm very keen observer of that, and hope that something's coming out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Refik Anadol's been trying to generate these kind of things using a database of your work, and it's been.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's been super. I've got an image on the front cover of my book.
Oh,
No,
okay, okay. I'm curious about it. Yeah, I mean, I'm very keen. I'm very curious and interested in this. So.
But I think I guess that it's probably Wolf that has been pushing it most. With
yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can ask a question about something that was mentioned earlier. I think about complexity. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It's wonderful to see the world and the work. And most of the times when I see Zaha's and your work, the word complexity comes into mind. It seems to be almost like a vernacular way of describing these shapes, and both in and my apologies, I'm not an architect. I will try to speak about form and shape, so I hope I do it okay. Both in the shapes, we call them complex, and also I can imagine in how they are built, how they are designed, how they are fabricated and installed is a complex thing, right? And I remember in one of your talks that I remember, yeah, I think you were speaking about Luhmann, and he had some interesting ideas. And I think that the idea of his that I like most is how he defines complexity. And I think he would define it as a system that you can no longer connect all the relationships in there. So that's how he would define the complexity, let's say threshold, right? And I wonder, do you think that your projects are this type of complexity? Because I also saw some continuation, some connections through spaces. Like what type of complexity do you think your projects?
Well, I mean, the thing is that, of course, complexity arises out of an explosion of combinatorics. And let's say the way in a building you get complexity if many spaces communicate with many other spaces, and in connection through vistas, through similarity, that you kind of associate them with each other, through contiguity, through alignment. So this kind of let's say multiplicity and density of relations, rather than having only one relation, a grid, or having only having things disconnected, that I wouldn't call complex. So we are striving for this kind of complexity, but we want to maintain legibility in the face of complexity. So they should be legible and retrieval and become transparent, that complexity. And that's why we need to reflect on, the cognitive capacities of users, and actually in the way that is the problem of complexity is what I believe in retrospect, what killed deconstructivism or made us move from deconstructivism into what was later called parametrism. Because in deconstructivism, you get that complication, let's say, I wouldn't call it complexity, of many things layered on top of each other randomly, and you allow any angles and shapes and superposition and intersecting things and so on. And but in the end, you get lost in your own drawing. So there's a lack of, there's no order anymore, and that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a complex variegated order, and for that you need to set up relationships. But we can comprehend maybe many simultaneous relationships and have that rich complexity without disorder. So in particular, if you work with parametric modeling, and where it's always about setting up correlations, it's always about having dependency relations. Nothing is brought in as a kind of without everything is brought in through. If you bring everything in through a script, it is always dependent on what's there, and is a function of what is there, and then you can trace back, and that's the way you build order. When you just throw things together, then you don't have that legible complexity, and you don't have the relatedness. You have maybe many elements, but you don't have relationships, or relations anyway, not relations you could retrieve, or you could rely on others getting and retrieving. And you can have trivially, you have thousands of relations, but you can make, these will be ad hoc descriptions. That's not of interest.
Can I just add one thing, Patrick? You might remember when Zaha was first invited to the Deconstructivist show. She was just shocked that she was even being considered in this group, because for exactly the reasons you were just saying. She said, "I'm not, there's no disorder or chaos in her world." It was a very kind of complete and well understood through sketching and through the drawings, all the things we've talked about. But and then I think the desire to be part of that show, for many reasons, kind of overcame this initial pushback. I remember hearing it in the office, but you probably did too.
In both cases, we are talking about complexity in a representative way. We are talking about if the drawings are complex or are not complex. But in a way, can we architects escape to the complexity that every building is? When you build the building is complex, not complicated, because complicated is another thing, but it's complex in a way. And when you say, Patrick, that you prefer legibility, in a way you have to choose and you prefer legibility, you are talking more about a formal thing. For example, in the tower, you decided to make it symmetrical. I mean, it's a symmetric building, but anyway, the context is not symmetrical. So the building, every phase of the building have to interact in terms of material performance, in terms of exchange of energy. It has to mediate with the context in different ways, every phase. So it's almost impossible to escape to this complexity. Just to add to the discussion, very controversial, but
I mean, what I realized is we would like to. It's nice what you're saying, that let's say if there's a building and each facade faces a different context, ideally these facades should reflect that and become differentiated. I would believe that would be in principle at least something a hypothesis one could consider. And at the same time, these four facades are still part of the same building, so they would have to be similar to the different contextual configurations, as well as similar to each other. And that's what we call kind of multiple affiliation. And you can do that. Something could be similar to different things which themselves share very little, but you can always find things which are shared between different elements. So I believe that is the case. I don't think technological under the hood complexity is of interest. Let's talk about design complexity in terms of what the final experience is. And if there is a complex life process with multiple audiences, with multiple simultaneous events, and the building is exposed to different sites and has multiple entrances, then it is already multifaceted. So each entrance should look, maybe there's a big and wide one and a narrow one and so on, but there should also be a family of entrances show at least that you recognize these are all part of one building, and at different parts of the building, you should sense that if this is a unity of functioning together. So if the different space in a building and different parts of buildings and a complex of buildings, there must be a reason why they are put together. The institution has multiple parts, is still an institution. So what I'm saying is there's always this kind of functional unity, and that should be expressed through the language of architecture, that you understand that these different parts belong together, as well as understanding that they're different from each other, as well as that each of the parts maybe has a particular affiliation to a context. If that, one of the lobbies is opposite another lobby and these two share something, or maybe there's a retail element in the lobby, so that connects up to the retail down the street. So these multiple relations, you should try to articulate all of them. I mean, you have to kind of select. It's a bit that thing, not everything is related to everything equally, but many things relate to many other things. And that's the game. And that's the interesting game. So because of life is complex, the buildings can be complex. If there was a super simple life, only one event, only one, ever repeating event with the same people, then you could have a simple, very simple space, which, it's a kind of simple church space where every Sunday the same thing happens for hundreds of years, and you don't need, then there's no complexity required. There's only one entrance and so on. And then there was, and in a way, all of these complexities, you shouldn't have technical elements get in the way. If there's a chimney, suppress it, because the chimney isn't of interest. It's an element too many. It doesn't have any separate social functions. That's my thinking. Kind of, it's a suppression of irrelevant differences and an accentuation of differences which make a difference, and at the same time understanding the unity of the various elements. And that this is non-trivial, you can see, for instance, an example is the Bauhaus building, which has the different parts quite distinctly articulated, but they're all kind of modern. But still, it is potentially disorienting. If you come from the building from one side, it looks very different from the other, that these different parts actually belonging all to the Bauhaus, particularly if other buildings are around it, it might fall apart. There's always a danger that the composition falls apart. And if you give up on symmetry, if you give up on proportion, because it would be too constraining, because symmetry is maybe, as you said, maybe not justified. What else do you have? And that's what one of the things we have is this kind of equilibrium composition. Yes, you do something asymmetric, but you're ordering it around a supposed center of gravity, where this kind of big bulk here is balanced by this larger thing here and this cantilever here. Then and at least you sense that this overall thing is a kind of would be a stable mobile. Then it has a center of gravity, and that ties together the elements which belong to that. And somehow, so this is another composition, and that's my, this is the way I'm rationalizing modernism throughout proportion and symmetry, but it maintains strongly the ponderated composition, the balanced composition. I mean, that's what they taught at the Bauhaus. That was Meath in Chicago had the students created composition out of multiple building parts, and the game was to have a balanced composition. What does it mean? It means there's a sense of unity. The thing isn't falling apart. Why? Because it is a kind of as if ordered, balanced around the center of gravity point. Just an example. So there are many other ordering, unifying techniques, gradients which run across something, and other kind of resonances and scripted affiliations, where you could have differences. I mean, I like a lot. I mean, maybe it's interesting to not have a full on symmetry, but use a kind of broken symmetry, where there is something mirrored, but in a strange and distorted way on the other side, where they're not the same, but they're kind of correlated. There's many ways of holding together a complex building and not allowing the composition to fall apart, because when the composition falls apart means there's disorientation.
Patrick, can I quickly show something?
And I just want to say one thing. That is what we're obsessing about. Let's say we've laid it out, the functionality is clear, but that's 5% of the work. And then there's 95% of making a composition work and tying it together with and honing it to its legibility. And then when you do all these perspectives, each vista is also trying to bring all these elements together and not having a clutter, not letting any space fall apart and any vista fall apart. And it's nearly impossible. There will always be views where the thing falls apart.
You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I put muted myself. Can I just very quickly share something to show you precisely what this is an image that was generated by Refik Anadol using style GANs, and it was using a database of the work from the office. And of course, it was part of a kind of a latent walk, as it was it's part of a video, as it's like, but you can capture at one particular moment something that actually, to my mind, kind of resonates with my impression about what the work of the office was. And I guess that the possibilities that I mean, Tom Main and Wolf Pricks, I mean, they have slightly different approaches, but they're both interested in the possibilities of AI. And I think for Tom Main, it's about opening up the kind of search space beyond those things that you might initially have thought about, but as a kind of combinatorial exercise. And Wolf Pricks something different to that, but similarly, kind of almost like a sort of like treating AI like some kind of muse that might inspire you and open up the possibilities of what things might be.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's a nice. I mean, it's something we should look into, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, let me stop sharing. Yeah. So I have a question in the chat here. A question about sustainability. To what extent does sustainability come into the project in Miami and elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm looking for is ideally, let's say there's this element which is about a bit of, embodied energy, where you choose a certain concrete which is going to recycle. I mean, these are just decisions you do. That they have a certain value, and that's where you get certified for. And we do those, of course. And the thing which is more interesting from an architectural point of view, we actively seeking out and drawing in and is where you have passive systems, where you work, for instance, with relief and shading, and where we work with climatic, let's say, adaptability with respect to regional conditions, local conditions. In the Middle East, very strongly because we have more harsh and more extreme climates. And Miami is very mild. I mean, but you have, of course, heat, and that's why the balconies help a lot with the shading. Right there, but in, let's say, the more interesting projects in the Middle East, where we looking for having a stronger impact on the morphology, coming out of the idea, for instance, of allowing spaces to be ventilated and shaded at the same time, and to minimize the use of machine. I mean, that helps a lot quantitatively later on, but it's also exciting because it is shaping the form in interesting ways, and it also is a parameter force, which I think in our Saudi project is quite several of our Saudi projects. These are very interesting, giving a curious kind of characterfulness to the project. The very kind of deep cut windows, the whole courtyard morphology, the same idea of orienting a courtyard with asymmetrically towards the wind and away from the sun. That same shape is in the solid courtyard and in the tensile roof part. So now you have the ontology of solid build, concrete build, and the tensile, and they both do have a certain, the oculus, let's say, tilted, and that means they become similar and more unified formally, while they're both doing have a certain purpose. There's also a certain orientation in the overall field, which is all shared. So these are the things we like, because it gives the whole thing more structure, more order, a peculiar form, a lawfulness to the form, similar to the way we like the structural morphologies to come through, and giving a kind of organic orderedness to it and variation. So we do very much like environmental engineering logics, passive systems, learning from the vernaculars of the world, where before we had all these machines, Their different cultures evolved interesting building morphologies which could sustain a degree of comfort without massive energy input. Well, usually without any energy. So this is very interesting to me, architecturally. Now that of course the other things which lead to a kind of platinum or gold lead, platinum lead, they are they're coming through the engineers. But also when it comes to energy savings, this is also very important for the architects in terms of saving all that space for all the heavy machine. And that's also quite a study, because the huge machines in the roof or in the big machine rooms in the facade, and there's also or big kind of energy blocks outside your building. None of this is nice. So the more you do of light-footedness, the more space. I mean, you have. If you can naturally ventilate and avoid all these kind of massive cavities for ducts and so on, this is all for. So in the pursuit of beauty and user friendliness is coincides with the sustainability agenda. That's the bits which I like.
Just one of the questions I find intriguing about the office is the way that it relates to the DRL. I mean, I think it's astonishing that on the one hand, you've got design research laboratory, research in it, in the title. And then you've got a kind of research unit going in the office, the code with Schumacher and so on. And there is this incredible bond between the two, in a way, because Schumacher is teaching on the DRL as well. To what extent does the office rely upon?
Well, it's not only Schumacher. I mean, we have another team now with Tyson, and we have also ex-DRL. We have the DRL feeds into the designers. Of course, feeds into Schumacher also, but everybody in code was a former DRL, but in our front-end design is massive amounts of ex-DRL. So that's still happening. We're still hiring because they're skilled up with what we need. And so it's not only researchers, we need obviously designers. And what we do in DRL is we're doing very complex designs. And they're not easy to, it's good that we have a chance to teach for 16 months, and then we pick up the best people. I mean, and I wish we had always that expansion that we can always absorb the lot. Sometimes we did it, sometimes we did the whole group. But this year we're still expanding, so we're gonna hire again. But Vienna was also a very good stream, the masterclass. So that was for 15 years feeding in from Vienna, and now for 25 years feeding in from DRL. So that's very important.
You would mention the term skilling up. So do you see the DRL as a kind of skilling up process for preparation?
It's skilling up as well. It's also at the other way. What is very important, both Vienna and DRL, is for us for me and Sharjah and Theo, of course, as well, but let's say in terms of the perspective of the firm, to try out ideas, which we are also thinking about in the company. That we do, as I said, for instance, the Miami Tower, the whole skeleton research. We did that first at the DRL and in Vienna for some years and so on, and then we did a lot of competitions. Similar, we have done all these tensile and shell structures in the office. I mean, that was paralleled with research at DRL. So it's design and in Vienna as well. So we're trying out a lot of things, new things, because in a firm, you have to be much quicker to come to a very tangible result. So this kind of idea proliferation is better done in the schools. So that's what this is a lot about. And then the training comes along automatically with that.
Maybe can I jump in to ask question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Patrick. Really nice to see you here. Yeah, and I'm really congratulations for this amazing project that you showed today. I remember I was also working on some of the sketches. So yeah, really glad to see that happen, like really realized, yeah. I just want to go back to a few slides, earlier slides of your presentation. And from my understanding, especially about the first page that you showed with different projects in one page, comparing and with also the Miami Tower, that the interesting thing about that page is that all the other projects in that page was relatively smaller scale, and they are probably very different from most of the other projects are a little bit structurally pure because they are small scale relatively. But I understand that Miami Tower, especially in that page, was showing the pure, if I understood correctly, showing the pure architectural elements without any additional decorative elements, that purely that architectural elements are revealed in the appearance of the facade itself. And I think that kind of achieved quite successfully in the outcome. And I kind of understand maybe that's what your ways of understanding or talking about what tectonism is. And I'm wondering what is the next milestone of that in the office, and whether if there are any other kind of early sketches that you are also looking into to build in the future.
Well, I mean, tectonism is a very ambitious paradigm, particularly when you do large projects, because it relies on these kind of engineering logics and fabrication logics to drive the architecture. Even the bigger, so it's rare that you can do a big project like this. I mean, the biggest would have been the Tokyo Olympic Stadium, where we had this interesting combination of shell arched structures and then tensile as secondary in that. So that was built out of that research and was an attempt to writ large. We have some new stadiums coming out where there is a very beautiful, strong structural morphology at play. So that will come out. On the skeleton towers, I mean, it's very we had to pull back a little bit. I mean, I'm trying to think about consciously bringing it back. I mean, it would be nice. It's just it's a tough one cost-wise to bring forward. I mean, we had some setbacks where we had skeleton versions of towers, and in the end it became a curtain wall and so on, or less expressed the structure. But it's not over for me. And then again, the other tectonism element, of course, is you can do with facade. So if you have a really good parametric differentiation of shading relief, if that's modulated in particular with respect to the different sun exposure conditions, and if if there's an overshadowing from another building that this kind of bleeds through, these kind of things I would consider under tectonism. So it would be an environmental logic, or if you go in with fabrication, I mean, you have smaller elements, hot wire cutting or 3D printing, with all these kind of the tool paths being visible, or the particular geometries. I mean, what the point here is that before we had only NURB surface, now we have many more complex. We have these kind of conic surfaces. We have the particular geometries coming out of hot wire cutting, for instance, or the particular geometries coming out of inflates or tensiles. They're all subtly different. Than with the seaming line. So all of that is for me tectonism, where the morphology is coming directly out of an optimizing structural optimization or environmental optimization, and that's, I think, very powerful. But to pull that off in larger projects is still a challenge. So and it reminds, you know, I have to kind of remind myself, good that you're reminding me of this, you know, because when every new competition comes up, is there an opportunity here? How can we kind of push this paradigm forward? And to some extent we do it because also code is taking in more jobs. You know, working with beautiful timber structure at the moment. The Roatan project is a code project where some of these features are coming through, but it's not an easy one to pull off on larger projects, on fast-paced projects.
I have one more question. Since we're in the American school right now, Florida University, I'd like to ask you a question of what is your general impression about American architecture and how American client developer is different from others? Does he have any specific demands or requests?
Well, I mean, I think that in America you have a particular, I mean, America and Europe are different in the sense that you have these large commercial firms who don't have a kind of architectural core or sensibility or DNA or soul, and they're too much commercially driven. And we are facing up with these firms in the international competition is very tough because they're underbidders severely, so that we can only win these works in China and elsewhere if we can compel and we convince the client that it's not the same. So you have a lot of these big firms against us and SOMs and KPFs. I mean, they do unbelievable unbelievable amount. Not that these projects aren't always, that they sometimes hit on a good project, but that's more of an accidental, that a particular architect in this firm around a particular project develops an ambition. That's not something which is in the system. And in Europe you don't have, you have different firms who have the kind of ideological direction, a research agenda, an artistic, an intellectual kind of project. I mean, you have those in America as well, but they tend to be then much smaller.
And can you also name, please, for example, top 3 cities which we have to watch from emerging from architectural point in the future, from architectural and technological points?
Well, I mean, at the moment it seems the world is relatively stagnant, except for China. I mean, our work is all in China, but the cities are so vast. It's also, you know, it's a drop in the ocean whenever you do something very special in these places. But I think Shenzhen is very powerful. Also the quality is very high now, Shenzhen.
Patrick, one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I mean, you're very unusual in many ways because you're a kind of practitioner, but very interested in theory. And also interested in kind of like, say, academic research, because you did a PhD alongside the practice, and you've been involved also in a couple of programs, PhD programs that I've been involved in. The European Graduate School one, which is a kind of like it's a kind of a where you can work in practice and do a PhD, and so too the one in Tongji. What do you see now the role, or how do you see doctoral education, because this is a doctoral program, and the increasing need in some ways or otherwise to engage with this kind of a doctoral level research?
I think it's important. I mean, I mean, I generated some of doctoral students also before I came to outside EGS and outside Shanghai, and in terms of the Vienna, using Vienna because I'm still a professor. I mean, without pay, but so I had and I got also this small research grant, and I had a number of people working there because I felt that for some of those researchers, in particular the Asian-based parametric semiology, that project, I've done a number of illustrative studios at Vienna and at the DRL, and then to deepen that and to make it real, to bring it up into a properly functioning simulation tool isn't feasible. So that's why the PhD is very good. You can do more. You get the best minds. You get them for longer. This was 3 years. Not that everybody kind of fully sustained it. And then we blended that into the office as another research department. So the PhD is very good and picking up things which maybe you can illustratively and first kind of sketch up and explore in a master degree studio, but then to really have to really work something through which becomes usable and has actual results. That's what you need the PhD for. And I think it's very important that we have that, because we don't have, most firms don't have research, and it's very difficult. I mean, we have a sizable research now, a group, a total of 20 people, so that's quite strong. But we have 450 people, so this is rare to have that. We would like to expand our research, and we, of course, this research group is also then working partly on projects. It's only 50% pure research, and the other 50% is projects, but they're kind of manifesto projects, particular research-oriented projects, which not necessarily are high profit projects. But that's rare. I mean, so the university and the PhDs are still necessary. If we had more large firms who all had research departments, then this would be less necessary. I mean, a firm like Foster obviously has a lot of research groups, and they're also very good and important. But even for us, I think in the end, the research team in the office, which turns out to be more potent than the PhDs at the university, it's just more directed, and you get more. Maybe there's more pressure to succeed, and you get less isolated. I mean, I tried to. I mean, what turned out was the risk, I don't know. But in Vienna, I had this team, of course, but they all did their own thing still at the same time. It's a lot of freedom. You don't have to show up every day. Far from it. So you totally rely on individual, and we did a lot. I mean, I came out there and we had sessions, so it was good. I'm not saying it wasn't, but I think it's still very important. The next step, more productive even, I think, is the research department, but they're not in abundance. So definitely, university PhD is a very important stepping component in the overall, let's say, progress of the discipline.
We've got a question from Marina, but just can I just ask a final question first before I pass on? And that is, I mean, you are unique as a theorist. I mean, and that's what you're describing as kind of applied research, very much so. You know, so what role do you see for theory still in architectural practice?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's very important to have an overall framing and overall direction to understand what to guide the judgment of which direction, which paradigm is valuable to be invested in, and also to tie in the architecture, the discipline's progress into the development of societal and civilization, basically. So that's where I see architectural theories embedding the architectural agendas into an overall societal agenda.
Marina, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. I have it's a similar question in a way, because I have this question about what is an architect in the context of AI, and it's always in my mind. I don't know how to define what we do, and so my question could be like, if in your opinion, do you believe that an architect should be like this idea that we have of a surfer, like a kind of going with the waves, like a kind of flexible professional, or do you believe that we need to be more resistant in a way, and like more like a kind of warrior to try to I don't know, to resist certain things that are happening around us? So that would be my question. Maybe I put two figures, but you can pick other if you have other.
Well, I don't know. The resistance by itself is of interest. Of course, if you have certain fads and fashions which are vacuous and short-lived, you shouldn't jump on them. But I believe in movements. I believe in collective, endeavors, because that's where things tie into each other. There's a cumulative potential in many researchers over a number of years achieving something, and that's something I'm looking out for. I mean, so movements are important, and you should be part of it, not being isolated on an isolated path. But yeah, if there's kind of some fads, there should be resistance. But it's not easy sometimes to know. That's what you need theory for. You need this an overall kind of worldview with certain key priorities and criteria of critique and argumentation, where you can kind of say how, to either defend or dismiss, for instance, this new AI research. I would defend it. I would, you can't be, and I think it's also important to not be overcritical. I mean, the whole point of research and at the frontier in the avant-garde of innovation is that you have to you have to give space. You can't demand final and concrete and pragmatically viable results too quickly. Then you kill it. I don't know what the proper time horizon is, but when gotta have a kind of strategic tolerance with respect to that exploratory trajectory, if the overall direction is right. And I certainly think that AI research, I'm not sure if the PhD group is aiming for that. I would 100% support that and not resist that. I think that's definitely valuable.
Do you have some further questions?
Yeah, I think we need to wrap up.
Yeah,
maybe
Patrick,
if there's one
great.
more, then.
Really.
So yes, this has been fantastic, Patrick. I really
great.
Thank you for your generosity. I'm blown away by how generous you are, given the commitments you have. And I think for all of us, this has been incredibly insightful, because you have a very privileged vantage point where you can kind of comment on practice and cutting edge practice, coming from a position of both a theorist and also someone who's teaching. And I think this is incredibly valuable for the rest of us. I'm going to take this away and think about it. And what I would want to say is that this has been spread all over the world. Some of our students, we have Anna, who's in Australia right now. We have several people in China, and we are live streaming through Bilibili in China as well. So it's been a kind of, the message is getting out there. So
but I'm just curious, is Philip and Wang Yu and Suman, are they students here in this program?
Yes, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say students, but I can't call them students. These are
that's amazing. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, fantastic candidates, doctoral candidates, and I think it's fantastic.
Okay.
I mean,
great.
I don't know. Also, Theodoros Galanis, he actually writes a lot of the software for AI software. So we have some fantastic people on this, and it's really it's an incredible journey.
Well, congratulations, guys. It's a good team, it seems.
Absolutely.
It's just great to keep learning.
I know. I think that's the point. Actually, is that I remember the times when I went to the AA and I saw Rem sneaking into the lecture hall, and I think that's my point. Is if you shut down and you think you've learned it all, that you're never going to go forward. You have to keep learning, and I always learn from my students, and it's a continual journey. And this has been a fantastic debate. So, any final comments from anyone before we let Patrick go? It's fantastic to have him here. So anyway, Patrick, we look forward to seeing what's going on. Especially, I want to see what's happening in China, the kind of work that's coming out. So thank you for your generosity. I want to finish one final comment, and that's that we had Patrick very generously, when I was teaching at USC, came along to USC for a conference there, and we had this kind of debate going on. And I remember this one comment by Peter Zellner, who was kind of, I don't know, he was arguing about something, I'm not quite sure what, but anyway, at the final point, that Patrick just kind of bombarded us with images from the office, and Peter Zellner put his arms up and said, "I surrender." And I think that in a way, this is what I don't have. I could argue whatever, but I do not have the background of all that work, which is so convincing, and, I've got to say that I want to repeat this thing. When I was a student, I eventually saw what was happening with Zaha's office and what was going there. I thought, that's architecture. And I think this is really the contribution that has been made by Zaha and the office, and you carrying on that thing, is that, to inject these ideas and this inspirational sort of work that's become a kind of catalyst almost to allow other people to open up and think in new ways. So I think that, just to go back to Zaha herself, I mean, that's really what she's done. She's really kept architecture alive in a way, and opened up new ways of thinking. And I think that's exactly what's going on in the office these days. It's fantastic to see. I think history will look back on this office and say, wow, what a contribution that's been made. So thank you, Patrick. Thank you both for this particular session, and also for all the contributions you've made, theoretical, educational, and above all, the practice. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Patrick.
Guys.
And I just want to say the same, Neil, like Neil mentioned, that you continue doing this and keep on going with the legacy of Zaha Architects. It's really great listening to you today.
Thanks a lot, guys. Good to see you guys. Good luck. Bye.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Claudia. Bye.